Thank you for having me. I have an undergraduate degree from Wayne State in history and English. I have a degree in a Master's of Divinity from Union Seminary, where I studied under Cornell West and James Cone. I have a Master's of Biblical Studies and Biblical Languages from Ashland Theological Seminary, Master's of Public Administration from University of Michigan. I'm graduating in June with my doctorate degree. I am an athlete, or was an athlete. I'm kind of overweight now, but I played football and basketball, lettered in college and those, and was a part of the movement. You know, education for us was always the key to success. And when we were involved in protest, agitation, and facilitation, we always thought it was necessary to have some education. So that's pretty much who I am. Well, why don't we just keep going the way we were going? I mean, every academic institution that I've been in, when I was in the master's program, it pretty much had been one of the few male students. And along the line of education, I was told at a very early age, be careful about citing your opinions. And I'm just going to be honest, because I had some difficult times, even though it subsequently honored me as a distinguished alumnus of this institution, having unpopular opinions, forcing the administration to recognize, in some instances, outright discrimination, certainly didn't cast me in the most favorable light. Bernie Klein, who was a colleague of my father's when they supported Kavanaugh over Mariani and bucked the unions, was one of my allies. Seth Hirschhorn, who was over the program, who we've become better friends over the years, is one of the particular persons that I had to buck. And so I always tell people, you know, that you don't have to have a sterile, cerebral experience in college. It's really for the fomenting of ideas, and if you can't feel free to express them on an undergraduate and graduate level, you probably will be stifled when you get out in the professional world. So my experience basically was, you know, I wanted the degree, but I wasn't going to, you know, cower or become less than a man to get it. If y'all know what I'm talking about. Well, my whole life kind of changed because for the last probably 10 or 15 years, I was very active in civil rights work, helped to organize a National Action Network all across the country with Reverend L. Sharpton, led the major protests here at Fairlane Mall when Fred Finley was murdered. And about 6 years ago, I got into the educational arena, actually started a contract school called Detroit Cares for kids in the Detroit public school system or around that community who basically have been out of school. So I have right now 430 kids. I was sharing with the Vice Chancellor here, 55. The young ladies in my school are pregnant. Probably 80% of the girls are either gay or bisexual, transgendered. I have emancipated students. I have in-school substance abuse prevention and treatment. I have every gang in the city of Detroit under one roof. I never had a single student stabbed or shot. And to me, this is the most rewarding work I've ever done, because every day those kids look forward to seeing me. I mean, I go get them out of jail. I mean, I get them out of homeless shelters. I mean, whatever is necessary to let them know that, you know, they're the next Martin, Malcolm, Mary Cloud Bethune, Mary Church Terrell, whoever, and that the whole fate of our race and the fate of our people, the fate of our city, and even the fate of my personal life rests on them succeeding. So that's what I do. I mean, I'm also, as I mentioned, I have a radio and TV show. I own 11% of Channel 38. My business, about 60 employees, $3 million a year budget. My master's in public administration certainly helped me with that, because I have to, you know, figure out how I'm going to pay the IRS. Keep Uncle Sam, who's not friendly, you know, out of my affairs. But at the end of the day, what I was going to say too, by the way, when you talk about education, I read a piece many years ago in undergrad by Vincent Hardy called Education for What? You ought to read that, because when you talk about the talented TIF, you talk about people who saw themselves as race people in the years when they built these major black institutions, and here we are with far more and yet far less. it kind of gives you a sense of purpose, because I think too many people are self-absorbed. People are here for a career. People are here for themselves. And I think the true measure of a life is not how much you have, but how much you give. Well, I had a professor, who asked the question one day, what was the difference between a pile of bricks and a cathedral? And the answer was organization. I think the Masters of Public Administration that I got gave me the tools to organize my work, which is extremely important. There are a lot of bright people with good ideas, but don't know how to organize that work, don't have structural technologies, scientific management. For example, Frederick Taylor, who is really the person that should have gotten the credit, not Henry Ford, by the way. Go look up that gentleman who actually created the assembly line that Henry Ford borrowed. But how do you organize your work? I mean, how do you, as she mentioned, she got so many different things happening. I mean, I didn't give to the detail she does, but I mean, that's true for me. I mean, I have situations where other gangs want to come up to my school, the police never come. So how do you organize your work at the end of the day, that you're charting things, you know, putting things in some process, you keeping up with the detail. And then I found the most important thing is I got 60-some folks that work for me, is I think everybody has value, and knowing who can do what and how to manage people is very important. We always want people to do things the way we do them, but as long as they do it and do it well and get it done at the end of the day, that's what's important. So I learned how to manage people, I learned how to manage my time, I learned how to manage resources, and probably the most important thing, I learned how to make an honest assessment about my strengths and weaknesses, and be able to compliment myself. I'll say this, I have a $3 million budget. I'm good with managing money, but I'm not always good with the other detail that goes along with managing money. And for years I managed it myself, and we're doing maybe $500,000 a year when you're $3.5 million and we got 60 employees. It's pretty hard to walk around in your head calculating what payroll is and how much cash you need to cover payroll every 2 weeks. So, you know, really relinquishing things and developing people who can gain expertise and strengthen your organization is very important. And I learned that here at UM-Dearborn. You know, I was just thinking, I want to we had this conversation earlier because, you know, one of the things about education is learning how to learn, and it's not retainage, you know, because there's stuff I studied that I'd have to go back, and I can remember where I read it, but I have to go back to cite it and to find it. So one of the things about education is learning how to get information, not being able to always espouse information. Because one of the things that I want you to know is important is there are people who I know in this life are brilliant, but they don't have theory, they don't have praxis, they don't have nomenclature, they don't have vocabulary. I asked them what a praxeological non sequitur was, or skewed kurtosis. They might know what it is conceptually if I explain it, but they don't have the nomenclature. And that's so important in the marketplace that we operate in. This is one of my pet peeves, because when I came up, we weren't bilingual. I think young people, they are bilingual. They're not, we were bilingual, take that back. We could talk, you know, with our peers in a certain way, and then when we were professional, we were in the right environments, we could talk as we needed to talk. And so that's such an important thing. Learn the information, learn the labels, learn the nomenclature, know what it means. I mean, vocabulary is so important, so important. And there are many people who judge you by the information you can actually identify with specific theories, concepts, ideals, etc. Doesn't mean you don't know it, but sometimes we search for what to call it. And by the way, one of the things that was interesting to me in my program is there were people who wrote great books and made mega millions, and all they did was sit down and give an idea a name. I mean, never done it. Y'all with me today? I mean, never really managed a company. For example, broadening. You ever heard of the concept of broadening? Okay, broadening was a concept that Warren Bennis, I believe, created. And Warren Bennis said he was down in Nassau on a beach. And he had this great idea, you know, like John on the Isle of Patmos. You know, y'all know that, right? How many of y'all go to church? And guess what broadening was? Broadening was taking 8 people at 8 separate workstations, teaching all 8 of them each other's jobs, and then getting rid of 4 so they can do 2 jobs apiece. Now I call that downsizing. Come on, y'all gotta lighten up. But you wouldn't go into a corporate environment or a union environment and say downsizing. Broadening is more politically correct. Anyway, so what was the question again? I had to get that in.
Lesson, best advice for them as a student and as a professional.
Yeah, the best advice is to make the most of this environment. Why spend all this money and not study?
Yes.
I mean, you know, this whole concept of something wrong with you if you're intellectual, if you're smart. Man, let me tell you something. If a man can build a better mousetrap, write a better book, preach a better sermon, even if he lives in the most desperate part of the world, mankind will make a beaten path to his door. If you are good at it, you'll get paid. And that's the bottom line. I don't care if you got braids, no hair, I don't care what your sexual orientation is. People will find you and pay you for it. So don't waste your time. I mean, you're spending thousands of dollars for an education, and you got to walk out the classroom and scratch your head because you weren't paying attention. So that's what I learned. Be a sponge. You know, osmosis, absorb everything you can. Don't let cultural, you know, proclivities or, you know, social caste, none of that stuff keep you from getting what you need to know. Now, I'm Afrocentric. I'm not going to apologize. I'm a black man in a white world. And that's my worldview. But I can't allow what other people think of me, how they feel about me, to be the axis upon which my globe spins. If I have information, if I have intelligence, if I have cerebral contemplation sufficient enough to outthink whoever's around me, I don't care what color I am. People are going to pay me for it. So don't make any excuses, you know, for anything. What school you didn't go to, what people didn't teach you. You know, learn the most you can. That's a valuable lesson. And then when you get out, just because you don't know anything about it, don't let it be foreign to you. Because if you learn how to learn any environment you're in, you can figure out what you need to know to survive and prosper in it. If you don't mind, I was just, you know, I'm a preacher, so, you know, thinking about my closure. How to open the doors of the church. But, you know, the line of progress is never straight. I stood at Metropolitan Hospital in 1971, 16 years of age, and watched my mother at 43 years of age take her last breath. I didn't pass another class in high school for a year. I had enough credits, though, and I graduated from CAS with a 1.5. And I enrolled in Wayne through a special program called Project 350. Noah Brown, who was vice president, African-American man, who was a Kappa crosser, my dad, 31 Alpha Beta. And I dropped out. I spent a year and a half working, you know, and not going to school. And some people came along in my life who told me that I had more to offer than what I was presently producing, and got me into school. And I just want to say a couple things, because I had my oldest son doing much better now, but you know, he had a full scholarship at Lawrence Tech, and had to pay a dime, and he dropped out. And he came home one day. I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Well, you know, white folks don't want me there." I said, "Really? And what did you do?" He said, "I quit." I said, "Well, you just helped. I mean, you just gave them what they wanted." And I told him, I said, "You know, when I was going through my worst day, a friend of my father sat me down. I was telling him about how my mother died and all the stuff I went through. He said, 'Son, the only time you experience friction is if you're moving. If you ain't going nowhere, ain't no friction.'" And I just want to say that to you, because we concentrate on the stuff that's against us, and we don't focus on the stuff that's for us. Now, topography, I hate to use all these big words, but landscape is inevitable. I mean, terrain and rough spots. I mean, that happens in life. But the focus should never be external. It's always internal. You have to find some mantra, some meditational mode, some distant place that you go where you find the source of supply you need to overcome. I'm done now, but I'm gonna tell you what mine was. This is a true story. My great grandmother, Maddie Sheffield, died in 1962. She was 112. She's buried in Atlanta, Georgia. She lived right on Hazelback in Detroit. And I would laugh on Friday because she'd get together with my grandma and grandpa, and they would soak their feet. They had these crumpled toes, corns, and bunions. Had to cut holes in shoes to wear them. And they get that jackknife and they get to carving that dead skin off. And my sister would put me up in front, and the two of me behind me, they pushed me around the corner to look at her feet. And I laughed one day and she snatched me. She said, "Boy, hush your mouth. The history of Negroes have been etched on these toes. I walked miles to get a 4th grade education. Some of you Negroes will walk across the street to get a high school diploma." Now there are people who have fought, bled, and died for us to have an opportunity to not only get educated, but for us to take the skills, the gifts, the talents we have, and instead of us being the laughing stock of the nation and heralded in newspapers for all the crime and all the things that are almost immoral and disgraceful, you all have the opportunity right here to salvage our people. And I'm not talking about just race relations or in terms of just black folks. I mean, we got people, poor people, working class people, who need folks that commit themselves to the task of thinking about something other than themselves. Now that's what education did for me. Education gave me the tools, the techniques, the terminology, the ability to be able to take something that was innate and inherent in me and have the ability to use that for other people. And I will say this, and I'm done. If whatever you do is for you, you will fail. You'll fail. I don't know anybody in this life that's been so successful simply because they looked out for themselves. And so that's what you're here for. You're here to get an education. If you're a doctor, find out what the cure for cancer is. You want to be a lawyer, uphold the rights of people, make certain that you take that cheesecloth for the peaking maiden of justice and make her really blindfolded so that all people, regardless of color, class, and consciousness, are treated fairly before the bar of justice. That's what education is about. Y'all hear me up in here?
Yes, sir.
I really hope so. Because if it's about a job, you'll be running from employer to employer. So here's what I'm saying. I'm preaching now. I'm through. Don't try to be important. Try to be valuable. I don't think that education serves just one purpose. I think it's important for us to eat. The Bible says if you don't work, you don't eat. So, I mean, you should be trying to number one, see what you're called to do. I went to law school twice. I went to law school for 2 years. I went to Union Seminary. My father wanted me to be a lawyer. And I left Wayne State's law school with a 3-point-something plus average. But I was called to preach at 11 while I heard Dr. King preach, who was in town for my dad, and I left. And I did what I felt I was supposed to do. And I think everybody here has some calling. And the wonderful thing about life is when you get to work doing something you're called to do. So I think there's a sense of calling, but there's also an occupation. But I also think that education is for freedom. And I love Phil Fowler's work on the biography of Frederick Douglass when Frederick Douglass was in Maryland and his slave master's wife was teaching him how to read. And he would take the pages and she would give him and go into the barn and read it. And the slave master overheard her teaching and got mad. And Frederick Douglass heard what he said. He told her, if you keep teaching him how to read, you'll forever unfit him to be a slave. And so that's one of the purposes you've got to keep in mind, is that it is empowering, it's enlightening, and it gives you freedom. But at the same time, you also have to have a job. So to the degree you can work both of those, I think is important. Okay, now tell me what comes in there, you know, I don't know what the school offers, but there's interest inventories, which you can take that will show you aptitudes you have for certain careers and occupations.
And that is,
And then, no, that's all right, and then there's the Myers-Briggs typologies.
I'll take them.
And you need to do those because those will also tell you whether or not you're suitable for, I mean, if you're an introvert, don't be a lawyer,
Right.
unless you're gonna do legal research. Because the lawyer has to get up and advocate in the courtroom on behalf, passionately advocate. So those are a couple of tools that can kind of help you in terms of, and the other thing, of course, when I was in college, the big thing was market trends. You know, looking at where jobs will be, you know, when you get out of college. Because there's no point of you studying something that, you know, a piece of paper is not even worth what you paid for it.